Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Here is your host Arif Jahangiri with the program Community Talk. And today in Community Talk, we want to discuss about the challenges facing by the modern day families. The family is the central unit on which the society is built. And strengthening this unit is a key to building successful and healthy societies and individuals. All the major religions of the world, especially Islam, have constantly focused on the importance of the family unit and the family cohesion as first and essential step toward protecting the children and the moral fabric of the society. As a Muslim Canadian and a father of 3 children, 2 of them are going to in the university and one is in high school, I believe there is no job more important to me and my wife than raising our children to be the healthy individuals who are proud of their dual identities, first as a Muslim and second as a Canadian. As you know that this is not easy, especially since the tragic event of 9/11, which have increased fear in the lack of understanding on both sides. West fear Islam and Muslim fear West. Raising children who are proud to be Canadian and proud to be Muslim, therefore, is not easy, but is essential that if we hope to bridge the gap between the Islam and the West and show the world that two can coexist in the peace and harmony, they can live together in the peace and the harmony. And in this 21st century, we live in a global village and interconnected physically, spiritually, economically, politically, and every other aspect. The future of the Muslim world and indeed of the entire world depends to a great deal on what kind of children we are going to raise in our families. So let's introduce you 2 of the distinguished guests to discuss on this important subject. And one of them is people who are living in GTA, they know him very well. He's our speaker, a lot of program, he speak out in different mosques, different conferences, and one and only Brother Umar Zia. He is the principal of Woodlands School. Welcome, Brother Umar Zia, to our show. And the second one is also a family, I can say, a very famous activist, and you will find him if you heard the name of the Muslim Fest. These are the forces behind that biggest one of the festival of the city in Mississauga, and is the vice president of Sound Vision, Brother Taha Gayur. I've been invited to talk on this specific topic. Thank you, Brother Taha and Brother Umar Zia, to talk about the family issues. That's my subject today, and inshallah ta'ala we will try to discuss that. What are some challenges really modern day families are facing? I want to start with Umar, with you, and because you are more in the school side, you are very much interactive with the youth as well, and you will see day-to-day challenges of the youth as well. So what are some major challenges do you think that the modern day family is really facing?
It's a good question. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the invitation and for sharing some thoughts. I think if we look at what's happening in schools currently with the modern day family during the COVID time period, what we're finding are a number of new barriers that our students and young ones are needing to overcome. One of the major gaps right now that we're finding are socialization gaps. The isolation that has occurred over the last almost 2 years now has caused a lot of our young ones to forget or not know or lose some development in terms of how to interact with their peers, how to interact with their teachers. Another area we're finding another barrier is isolation, where students are back to school and they're happy to be back at school. However, we notice a lot of our grade 9 and grade 10 students are not sitting with friends. They're sitting alone having lunch. They have not had that time to socialize, to get to know one another. Because of the COVID rules and the protocols that we have to have in schools with social distancing, wearing masks, a lot of these artificial barriers are now causing real barriers in the development of our children. So these are some of the issues that we're finding in our young ones. Families are finding that, and what I often get are calls from parents asking me to make extracurricular activities mandatory for their children, because this is the third area where, because of isolation, because of the lack of socialization skills, a number of our younger students are not wanting to engage with schooling, other than education, other than classroom work, to engage with each other, to get involved in athletics or to get involved in clubs. We find our senior students are engaged because they were able to continue on. They experienced grade 9 and grade 10 in a regular school setting and are able to continue with that process. But our younger ones have not had that experience. So they're finding there are some difficulty in how they are interacting with each other. So these are the three major areas, the new barriers we're finding. I might say press pause here and let
Okay, no
Taha
problem.
enjoy your
No
thought.
problem. I want to add, Taha. Taha, you are yourself is a parent, right? And definitely you are facing the same type of challenges, and you are one of the major organization that you are working with the youth. I saw that, especially the Muslim Fest, one of the biggest festival in Mississauga. And you're running with different issues of the youth. I know that Davanat and Sound Vision, they are working with the youth as well. So what you see that, what is Umar is saying, how much you want to add on that one, or you say that, oh, these are maybe the additional, some more information what Umar is thinking, but there are some positive side as well.
Well, I don't know. I have to think a little bit more about positive. I thought, in terms of challenges, definitely there are so many more, and I think Brother Umar did a very good job of summarizing a lot of those. I think related to what Umar said, this the lack of physical activity, especially for boys and young boys, and lack of those avenues has been definitely a challenge for both parents and young boys in particular. I would say young girls too. But this is something we hear a lot more now that things are opening up. Parents want, and even kids want to go out and start doing things, but unfortunately our schools and in even like Muslim institutions, not-for-profit institutions, and community centers are not even fully open yet, and even not even offering a lot of those services yet. A lot of those fitness programs and classes not even back yet. So this has been quite a challenge, and you do hear a lot about it. Another thing has to do with something that we were just talking about earlier with Arif, which is a term now, that I'm hearing more and more of, and never knew that there's something like social laziness that you're seeing. And it's again connected to what Umar was saying, this idea that, even one-on-one in schools, youth and kids don't want to be socializing and talking much, but you can see that it's reflecting in, for instance, their desire to go back to masjid, their desire to even go to Jummah prayers, or even community events if there are any even happening. And you see that more and more, and not just youth, but actually parents don't want to go to anything. And the good excuse as well, COVID-19. But unfortunately, people have just become lazy, socially lazy, and really just they don't want to make an effort to come out to even sometimes important events, in funerals and many other critical things that are so important. And the last third point I would mention is on the other hand, it has caused a lot of young people who were actually very social, and I know some people who are very social, and COVID-19, and even now, hopefully at the tail end of it, let's hope, inshallah, the lockdowns and everything, you can see that a lot of young people are actually having a lot of anxiety and depression because they are not able to go back and be able to actually see youth and be able to communicate with others the way they used to do before. Many young girls in particular have faced a lot more of this. They have not been able to go back to having parties and all that kind of stuff they used to socialize the way they used to socialize before. Unfortunately, those are very limited, if any.
Yes, so Umar, just a wonderful point actually, Taha. I just want to go, because very important point that I myself feeling that challenges, and I'm talking when we are, when we not started a program before this program, I'm talking with Taha, that I'm also feeling that same challenge. I have my family, I have 3 kids, a daughter and 2 sons. We are, before this COVID-19, alhamdulillah, we try our best to go to the mosque, pray regularly with at least couple of times in the mosque, right, every day. But it's really challenging for myself as well to go out every day and really pray in the mosque. And you can imagine when I'm talking with my kids, and it's not easy for them really to go as well. And this is one of the social impact happened by the COVID-19. How we can come out from this?
think it's a good question. I think if we look at, you had asked earlier about some of the positive side effects of COVID-19 on families. And one of the aspects I think a lot of people do recognize is that there is a lot more togetherness of the family itself. There's a lot more time for people to reflect upon what it is that they're doing in this world, what their future plans are. In the education side, I've had many more conversations with students about career planning, career choices than perhaps we've had in the past, because people have time to sit down and think about that. Parents are becoming more engaged with their children. They're learning a bit more about each other, perhaps sharing stories, finding different ways to connect than perhaps they had in the past. In order for us to come out of the social laziness, or to come out of the, this cloud that we're kind of experiencing, I believe it really takes a lot of energy and effort, and it will take some time. There's a lot of trust that we need to build up within society again, feeling safe to take off our masks in public, feeling safe that we can become part of society again. I recognize that at several massages they are now standing shoulder to shoulder, and yet some people feel a little uncomfortable with that. And so I think it will take some time for people to come out of their shells again and start to re-engage with life, and to re-engage with the different aspects of socialization again, and realizing that there is a space for us to get together. There is a space for us to become who we are, but perhaps there's also a growth process with that as a society, as a whole, and as individuals as well. So there's a lot of different factors we have to take into consideration. If you also take for a moment thinking about what happened over the summer, the incident that happened with George Floyd would not have happened if not for COVID, when everybody was at home and able to engage in some of these social justice issues. So I'm sure Taha can speak to this at length, being in that field, that part of the isolation has also allowed for individuals and for families to become much more aware of some of the disparities happening in the world, some of the injustices happening in the world, and really taking time to learn and to think, ask ourselves the question, how can I make a difference in the world? And how can I take what's happening in the world, such as anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, genocide against the Uyghur or Uyghur people, and so on. So we've I think spent a lot more time learning about those aspects of life. And I think that what we're going to find, I hope at least, as we come out of COVID and move forward, we'll find people becoming more engaged with social justice types of activities.
So one of the challenges always there, and I find that is still, especially when we have the double identity or triple identity. We are bringing our youth here, children's here, or those who are born and raised here. So they have the triple identity, sometimes double identity. At least take two, that we are Muslim and Canadians, right? So Muslim Canadians. So these are the two identities. So how can we build a personality within our youngster that they can adopt both this personality and become a very successful citizen of this country?
Oh, that's a huge question, mashallah, and definitely not easy to answer. But one of the things that comes to mind, and this is something that for quite some time I myself had to deal with internally and of course externally in our community, because this idea that are we Canadian first, or are we Muslim first, or are we something else first, right? And the answer should be that we are Canadian first, and we're also Muslim first. And we're also students first, and we're also parents first, and we're also, let's say a homeowner first, or whatever, a role that you are playing. You're a manager first, or a teacher first, or a doctor first, whatever role God has given you to play in society, and whatever is a priority for you right now, you're made up of all of those identities. And unfortunately, many times it's Islamophobes who like to corner us, so that we basically are forced to choose between one or two. As Muslims, we have no problem. Muslims have gone around the world since the time of Prophet, peace be upon him, and they adopted all those identities very comfortably. They became part of indigenous communities, and they were part of their own cultures and societies, and Islam became part of it. And it was the most beautiful thing you see as Muslims. It's unfortunate that in the West, in Western countries, we are often forced to answer this question: are we Muslim first or Canadian first? So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that as Muslims, we need to be comfortable in our own skin and realize that, yes, we're going to be different and distinct, not because of the type of food we are eating. Maybe most likely our children are, eating food that, everybody else in Canada eats. But it's more to do with the fact that, and it's not even about skin color. It's more to do with the fact that our values is what defines us. And many of those values that are Islamically based and that are Islamically rooted are also Canadian values. And where there is a conflict, that's where we negotiate. That's where we also know where to draw the line as people of faith. And this is what Canada is about. Canada is not about assimilation. It's about multiculturalism, which should be about, which should recognize unique, distinct contributions and cultures, and of course values of individuals from around the world who happen to call themselves Canadian. So that's my thought process. Of course, that being said, there are lots of external pressures we can talk about that are also impacting, of course, Muslim values, that are also trying to take away Muslim values, and again, in the name of secularism, the name of being a good Canadian citizen, which is something that, of course, as Muslims, we need to work on.
So, Umar, I'm just want to move in the same subject because there is on the parent side, especially on the parent side, it's not easy for them to accept the change, and the change is that their children are raised and born here, and they are more adopted in this society, right? And the change is coming inside the family and inside their behavior as well. And it's not very easy for the person like me whose life is all passed in back home. And when I see my children are doing different, so how for the parent, how they can work out on this issue, specifically in our society?
Thank you. It's a great question. We could probably do a whole show just on this one question here. Really about how do we as parents connect with our students, connect with our kids, not our students, but the question we ask ourselves as educators. How do we in the classroom connect with our students? I started teaching 22 years ago. And 22 years ago, there was no such thing as a smartphone. The internet came out in 1995. I'm talking about teaching in 98, 99. So the internet was very fresh at that time. So yes, we have this challenge as parents. We also have this challenge in the classroom as well. You mentioned sometimes parents coming as immigrants from different lands coming to Canada are going to face certain challenges. I'm born and raised here, grew up in Scarborough, and I still have issues, challenges with my own children growing up here because, again, growing up in the 70s and 80s is far different than growing up in the 2000s, right? A very different society, a lot of different types of distractions that are ongoing, and different problems that emerge as a result of that. So I want to just give a word to our parents is to not be worried, right? We need to change our parenting style based on the time that we're living in, regardless of where we are born or what values we carry with us. It's really about coming to our children. I keep saying students because I'm in education, but coming to our to our students, coming to our children in terms of where they are at, understanding where are my children at, what kind of life are they living in 2021 here in Canada, what do they have access to that I did not have access to, and how do the devices and the elements of life that they have access to shape and form how they think and how they interact within society. But Taha talked a little bit about identity, being Muslim and Canadian, and there are a number of identities that our children carry with them. Gender in the 21st century now is an identity, male and female, and there are several societal factors that govern what does a male or a female do, what do they like, how do they talk, how do they walk, what kind of friends do they have, what should or should not interest them. If we look at a different type of identity, our faith-based identity. Being Muslim in the 70s and 80s is far different than being Muslim here in the 21st century. We did not have the word Islamophobia back then.
That's right.
There's more cultural type of racism we are faced by calling the P word. I hope your viewers don't mind me. I'll just spell it a PAKI. We call it the P word. We don't use that word in education. Very derogatory, racialized slur. That was very common back then. But now we've replaced it with terrorist, and we have other Arabic words that are used to question Muslims, jihad and Sharia law and hijab and all of these other elements that did not exist way back when. So more of a faith-based racism is occurring now versus a cultural racism that we kind of grew up with in the 70s and 80s. So there's a shift in terms of our faith-based identity. So how does that impact our kids? Do they want to or not want to be Muslim? How Muslim do they want to be? There's a lot more access to Islamic resources in the English language today than there was back then. Right? Back then, meaning in 60s, 70s, and 80s. We look at political identity as well. A lot of faith-based people align themselves with certain political parties. This is more, as we have grown as a community, this has become more of a newer phenomenon that didn't exist necessarily quite a while ago. I mean, keep in mind that human rights came to Ontario, yes, maybe 50s and 60s, but really was not solidified as a nation until the late 70s, early 80s. So political affiliation was not as prominent on our minds as it is today. We look at social identity. Who am I within society? What social location do I have based on my wealth, based on my knowledge, based on the degrees I carry, or what school I go to, or where in the world I live? You know, people often joke, I live in Oakville. Ooh, Oakville versus Mississauga or Brampton, cool. Right? So sometimes even where we live can add to a certain type of social identity as well. So there are a wide variety of elements that our children are involved in, and we need to become more aware of them as parents and be able to have conversations with our kids about what is life like. And as a parent, having the humility to ask our kids, what is life like where you don't talk, you text? What is life like where when you go to school, when we were growing up, you go to school, you see your friend, you come home with your family, you see your friend the next day, versus now where you're on your device, 24/7, 365 days a year. Some people say 26 hours a day because you can't even have it out of your hand. Or, they're called FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So these are it's a very different lifestyle that our kids are going through. So it really is important for us as parents to sit back and ask our kids, what is life like, and try to understand things from their perspective so that we can learn better how to support them as they struggle with these elements.
Wonderful. So I just want to move on the same things, because one of the aspects of Taha, especially I feel there is a fear factor within the West about Islam and the Muslims, right? And the similar fear factor within the Muslim society about the West as well after this Islamophobia. So there are two factors are there. I don't know that how the Muslim society have to do what to really overcome this fear on the Western society. We are trying our best. I saw that political side, social side, economical, we are trying our best. But I see that this factor is in last one decade, I see is increasing, is not decreasing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking why, of course, there's so many things that can be talked about, but definitely the big why has to do with the rise in essentially populist, nationalist movements, nationalist supremacist movements across the world. I mean, we saw with the rise of Trump and Trumpism, what came with it, and white supremacy, what came with it. We are seeing that across the world, across Europe. We're seeing that right now with the rise of Hindutva movement in India, and how literally, 200 million Muslims and their existence in India and their citizenship, is at stake. And so, subhanAllah, I mean, there's so much that is going on at a political level, and there are a lot of alliances. We're seeing alliances, what happened in Burma, and what is happening now to Uyghur Muslims, and what's happening now to Indian Muslims. I mean, these are not isolated events, or Palestine. I mean, these are not isolated events. There are actually alliances between a lot of these either dictators or movements that are enabling and emboldening such individuals as well as people to commit such atrocity crimes against particularly Muslims and of course other minorities. That being said, in North America, we have, of course, alhamdulillah, we are a lot better off, but it is shocking and sad at the same time that out of all the places across North America, even Europe, some of the worst forms and violent forms of Islamophobia occurred right here in Canadian soil, including the Quebec mosque shooting on January 29th, and then June 6th, just 6 months ago exactly, right here in London, Ontario. So there's a lot of forces at play. Media has a significant role to play in it, and of course, systemic government, systems in the government that are enabling such crimes and criminals to actually take to basically have a free ride and continue to do whatever they're doing, unfortunately has a role to play. And of course, education system, healthcare system. I mean, you can find all levels of government and society where there are systemic and systematic forms of racism and Islamophobia that are impacting lives of day-to-day Canadians. And all of this is, of course, compounded by what's happening internationally, and our foreign and the lack of Canadian government's spine, and lack of I would say a strong leadership and political will to actually stand up against all sorts of human rights abuses around the world. So all of that impacts day-to-day lives of Canadian Muslims and youth in particular, because they're the ones who are growing up here, and they're seeing that on the one hand, we feel so helpless to be able to take action on many of those fronts. On the other hand, of course, our government doesn't seem to sometimes have our back, even though, yes, we are seeing some progress thanks to a lot of advocacy efforts being done by NCCM locally or Justice for All globally and many other, alhamdulillah, who are working. But there's so much more work that needs to be done, and it needs to be at a massive level where we can raise awareness and be able to change the systems that are impacting lives, both physical and of course, spiritual and psychological lives of individuals who happen to be Muslims and Canadian.
Umar, wonderful point, Taha, you bring it up. So going back to the family again. So family, for all these challenges, what we are talking today, without a very strong family to face these all challenges is not going to happen if we don't have a very strong family. And one of the challenge which I feel within our Muslim society as well, that our youth are addicted, and is very common in the high school and in the universities as well. We are not very different from the other communities. Our youth are also impacted, and you are in the school. I'm sure that facing every day such. So where you see the lack of the family, where is the strength of the family is not there. That's why this whole thing is happening. Because I myself as a parent, I believe 100% that if the wife and a husband are together and they are taking care of their children and watching them and communicating with them, this is not going to happen. But it's definitely happening to those families who are not wife and husbands have the issues, and I will come back to Taha on that one as well. But I want specifically this drug addiction in our youth.
Thank you for the question. I believe one of the main reasons why we face these same type of issues in our Muslim environment or our Muslim community or our Muslim families is that oftentimes people think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. It's happening to the guy next door. It's happening to the person over there. It's not happening to me. It's not going to come to my family. My kids are perfect. We're great. And if we take that type of mentality, then we're not taking the time to prepare our children. We're not taking the time to have conversations of importance with our children about the wide variety of elements of life that create barriers and create addictions and create people to go wayward. It's not just about drugs. There is pornography addiction as well. There is girlfriend, boyfriends. There is alcoholism, even in Muslim youth as well. Vaping is on the rise. And as an administrator in Peel schools in the Peel region, I would have to tell you, be honest with you, it's not non-Muslims who are in my office I have to have conversations with and perhaps even suspend or have them move schools. Not that that's a very common aspect, but these types of issues are happening for all students, regardless of their faith-based identity. Mm-hmm. So my advice to myself, first and foremost, and to all of our parents listening in and watching this, is that it is so essential that it goes beyond just husband and wife being together. It goes beyond just having a family meal together. It is important that we have conversations about drugs. Mm-hmm. We have conversations about vaping. We have conversations about girlfriend, boyfriend. We have conversations about what we're exposing ourselves to on the internet, on social media, video games, TV, movies, whatever we are consuming through our eyes and our ears, how is that impacting who we believe we are, our identity as Muslims, our identity as family members, as siblings, as sons and daughters, and even as parents as well. Parents are susceptible just as much as our kids are at the same time. So modeling good watching, modeling good behavior in terms of choosing what to consume, what not to consume. I'll give you a very quick example. Common Sense Media, commonsensemedia.org is a website that my family uses. I use it at my school as well. So whatever I use at school, I use in my family, and I sometimes my kids are guinea pigs at home, and I'll try using it at school as well. Common Sense Media is a free website. There is a minor, if you want to have a membership, it doesn't cost very much money. I think $30 for the whole year, but it gives you a rating system for all TVs, movies, video games, and books and magazines. And you can see everything there is before you start purchasing these things for our families to consume. Just to give you an idea of some of the resources that are out there. The conversations we're having at home with our children cannot be a one-time conversation. These are conversations that are ongoing. Every time we're shopping at the mall together with the family, you see someone vaping, take 5 minutes, have that conversation, right? You see a story in the news about something that went wrong, take 5 minutes, have that conversation. All the time, regularly. Anytime you see an opportunity to have a conversation about what's right and wrong, and helping our children, make appropriate choices between appropriate and inappropriate, what's helpful, what's harmful, have those conversations with them regularly. This is how they will start to become conscious of what's happening around them and conscious about how they are interacting with the world and the people who inhabit it, and how they see themselves and portray themselves within the world as well. This can create a lot of positive outcomes. We can choose to be afraid and not talk about these issues, or we take the brave step, have these conversations, knowing by having these conversations we are supporting our children in their own growth and development, so that when they have to make a choice, someone at school offers them a vape, someone at school pulls out a bong and there's marijuana in it, somebody at school or in the community or at a party somewhere talks about girlfriend and boyfriend, or let's watch this interesting video on YouTube, or let's go to this interesting website, or let's watch this certain type of movie. They can make a choice, and they feel confident in being able to make choices that are appropriate for them and their identity, their Muslim identity, their family-based identity, their community-based identity, their academic identity. Right? All of these elements can help children really focus on what's right and what's wrong, and how they're going to propel themselves towards success. And success not just academically, but socially, emotionally as well. As you asked this question about drugs and vaping and so on, that's not nothing to do with academics. I've seen students with 95%, 99% marks, but they're still vaping, they're still drinking, they're still involved in other forms of addiction. So it's about the social and emotional support for our children that so many of us have left off or not given much thought to. So I encourage all of us, again, when we're looking at the success of our children, yes, academics plays a role, but social and emotional health, when we're thinking long-term success for when they're married and when they have their own children and when they, are managers and the boss of bosses or whatever it might be, that they have the social and emotional intelligence to interact with others in the best way, to take care of themselves, and again, portray themselves in the best way and present themselves in the best way and think of themselves and develop that self-esteem and confidence so that they can conduct themselves in the best way.
So wonderful, Omar, nicely elaborated this important subject, because I know that is a huge subject for the parents, and many parents are really facing these challenges because it's not easy for them to really handle their youngster. So another challenge, which is I feel that I think the behavior of our youth they are either shy. I find they are shy to communicate to each other, or the other aspect is they are very angry. I see either they are very angry personality and always in the anger, other personality they are very shy to talk about. So what's happening that I feel that these are the two behavior that causing to develop a strong family unit of our future generation. That's why we are seeing the increasing divorce in the young couples. What are some example you have or you see within the community, Taha, and that you want to really talk about that?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different things you just mentioned, but one thing, just sort of building on what Brother Umar said. I mean, mashallah, he covered everything I could think of, and much more eloquently. Just building on to what Brother Umar said, it is said that, and this is, by the way, a leadership lesson, but it's also a family level communication, basic communication thing, which is that everybody communicates, and a lot of people know how to communicate well, but very few people connect. And Brother Umar Zia talked about that connection. And I think this is the most valuable lesson as a family when it comes to communication, and parent and youth relationship or children relationship that we are often missing. And if you may recall, a few years ago, I remember seeing this. It was going viral at the time. Somebody asked a scholar, how do I make my kids pray? I've done everything and I try everything, but unfortunately, my kids don't want to pray, even though we have a good family lifestyle and everybody knows Islamic values. What do I do? And the scholar, and he was expecting a long answer with many hadith and, what you can do or cannot do. All he said was, make sure you keep loving them no matter what. Just start loving them and continue loving them. And the bottom line is that no matter how far your kids go, no matter what kind of addictions they may be, and I know personally families have gone through this, no matter how bad things are, if you are strong, your bond with your kid is strong, and even for that matter, your spouse or anybody else in the family is strong, and that level of connection is about love and not being judged, no matter what they're up to, and you're always being available, even if 10 years down the road, if it is 10 years later, your son one day will come back, and your daughter will one day come back. They may or may not choose the lifestyle you want them to choose, but you will still have that relationship. And maybe one day you'll have that opportunity to still be able to talk to them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be able to bring them back. Only thing that matters is really that valuable connection. That being said, we're talking about couples. I'll just say a couple of things very quickly. Not that I'm a perfect husband or a spouse, and none of us necessarily are. But I'll say one thing, why you see a lot more friction nowadays is, one thing is that our standards of living and our expectations of each other are absolutely unreal, absolutely ridiculous. And you see this over and over again among young people. Everybody looks for Mr. Perfect, Miss Perfect. That's one issue. But then even expectations, after you get married, what to expect. And, because we're watching too much Hollywood and watching too much Bollywood and many other things that, and we're watching a lot of things that we shouldn't be watching, and addicted to some of those things, as Brother Umar Zia just talked about, things that I shouldn't be even mentioning. So because of absolutely unrealistic expectations. Number two has to do with, of course, the idea that number two has to do with the fact that our own Islamic education and learning, we bring a lot of cultural baggages with us, how we deal with in-laws, how we deal with each other, financial responsibilities. All of those things are also impacting, especially the young couples that you were just referring to. And there's so much more we can talk about, but I think these are some of the basic things. And of course, level of tolerance for each other is just going down, because everybody has a device, everybody's got a car, everybody is in many cases both are working. So who really needs each other, first of all, right? I mean, anymore. Why do I need you if I have my own car, I have my own phone, I have my own circle of friends, I have everything? What do I need you for? Maybe other than spending some good time with each other in the evenings, or being maybe on weekends going out. And why do I need to put up with you? And why do I need to put up with kids after that, right? I mean, this mentality, of course, is very problematic. Not that we should put up with abuse, not that we should put up with bad marriages, of course not. But we're talking about healthy marriages that should be healthy, but they're becoming a burden because, first of all, because of our own thoughts, and because of what society tells us what an ideal marriage should look like.
So my last question, both of you, and then we wrap up this program. So what is the hope? Because I always want to live in a hope. When I pass out from this world, I want to see that my grandchildren and grandchildren who are living in this society, they are a good Muslim, at least, right? And they are a good citizen. They put their efforts in the building of the society. So those are my hopes. How you see that the Muslims are really moving in the right direction?
Our impact as parents, as elders within the community itself, and the question comes to, what are we leaving behind? What is our legacy as parents, as educators, as social activists, as members of our community at large? What legacy are we leaving behind for our children and for our neighbors and for the world itself? And what I would offer with regards to building hope in our society is to look back at a central pillar of our faith, and that is to live a life of sadaqah, to live a life of giving to others, right? Looking for what is needed in our society to make our society better, and asking the question, how can I make a permanent positive impact on this world before I leave? And that might be in raising righteous children and doing our best with regards to that. It might be holding on to our marriages and focusing on becoming the best spouse that we could be, just recalling some of the topics we've spoken about tonight. But it might also be being the best at my job. It might be being offering classes to youth. It might be becoming involved in sports or athletics and offering opportunities for those who are perhaps not as privileged to engage with society. It might be becoming involved in a political party and ensuring that Islamophobia does not rear its ugly head in some of our aspects of society. There are so many ways that we can leave a legacy and build that hope for the future, but it begins with believing that sadaqah, giving to others and helping the world become a better place, really is part and parcel of who we are as Muslims, as Muslim parents, and as Muslim members and members of the Muslim community within wherever we are living.
Same questions to you, Taha.
Well, I mean, I think hope is that, alhamdulillah, our kids especially are living in a time when this immense amount of access to information. And that information, of course, has its pros and cons. But let's hope that, inshallah, our kids and our youth are going to make the best use of this unprecedented amount of knowledge and access to knowledge, both Islamic and, of course, material and anything to do with career, anything. We hope, inshallah, they're going to make best choices in their lives to actually use that knowledge to make best choices in their lives. I hope also that our kids are more socially aware of what's happening to people around them and the world around them. This is personally my hope, that our children are going to be more critically aware of all the human rights abuses and injustices that people in our own communities right here in Canada and of course around the world are facing. That is a great source of hope, because it's the youth, as Brother Umar was talking about earlier, with this Black Lives Movement or anti-Indigenous racism issue, or now Islamophobia and anything else in between. It is the youth who are actually, mashallah, are at the forefront of doing great work, both Muslim and otherwise. I think these are some very positive things that we should think about, and our kids are actually, inshallah, going to follow that beautiful legacy as parents that we leave behind, and inshallah, outdo us in many ways, hopefully.
Thank you, both of you, to really talk on this important subject, that the challenges of the modern families. And I really enjoy both of you, and it's wonderful talk. And I hope that our audience our viewers is also watched this program, and they got many answers of their questions. And actually, some of the questions are sent by some of my viewers, because I have a group of the people where I send them that I'm going to do the program next. This one, you have some question, please send it to me. So some of them, they send me these questions as well. So I'm really thankful, Omar Zia and Taha Ghayoub, both of you. And I hope that we have a very bright future in front of us in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So नाज़रीन, आज आपने हमारे कम्युनिटी टॉक के प्रोग्राम को देखा। हमने कोशिश की कि फैमिली अफेयर्स के ऊपर जो है जो मॉडर्न डेज फैमिलीज़ हैं उसके जो चैलेंजेस हैं उसके ऊपर डिस्कस करें। मेरे दोनों मेहमान उमर ज़िया और ताहा गयूर ने इसके ऊपर बहुत सहर अफ़ज़ा गुफ्तगू की है। एंड आई होप that you will find some of the good answers that you are looking for, because these people are the one who are attached with our youth, and they both are activists. They both are actually giving the lectures and the speeches in the different mosques and in different places. I saw them. So they are the wonderful source of our community, and I hope that you will enjoy this program today. Inshallah, Arif Jahangiri will come back with the next episode next Wednesday. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.